Kratos' first outing on PS4 may be a little different to what you were expecting if you played the previous games. We played the first 3 hours of the game, and here to tell you all about it is Leon Hurley.
Hello.
Hi Leon. So we're going to go through the world, combat, his son, and the upgrade system, and give everyone an overview of how all of that works in the first 3 hours of the game. So let's start with the world, and we've got it here on the screen. So how has this changed?
Well, we're in Midgard now, which is sort of just kind of generic Norse kind of mythology. It's Viking times. Midgard's a name's been given. We don't really sort of know kind of exactly when or where. It's just Viking stuff. And obviously they made it clear that this is Kratos. This is not like a reboot. This is him from Spartan times. He's got his Spartan rage. They're not kind of like giving away too much at the moment, and they've asked us not to talk about a few things about sort of, you know, how he's got to be here. But yeah, he's in Viking times. He has a son. The world is, I thought it was very much sort of Guillermo del Toro kind of infused when I was, there's some creatures and things that we don't get to see here. But it had that feel of like a Del Toro Hellboy almost kind of fantasy world. There's sort of some monsters and some creatures you see, and you can look at this sort of vault here. It looks like that kind of almost like Golden Army when they're off looking for, you know, mystical temples and stuff. It's a beautiful looking world.
Now I'm going to say right now that looking at the way that the camera works in this and the way the puzzle works and the interactions with his son, that it feels very Uncharted for someone who's watching this footage.
The only time it felt like Uncharted to me was when you climb. There's a few little traversal sections when Atreus is on your back and you're like shimmying along like a little ledge, and it's like that's like, oh, that you think of Uncharted. But then you do that with like Tomb Raider. Anywhere where you climb something, you start to think of Uncharted because so much of Uncharted was climbing. But combat-wise and sort of characters and the feel of it all, none of that really feels like Uncharted, because we'll see the combat is very, very kind of aggressive, very sort of physical combat. You're swinging this Leviathan axe, which is a new tool that Kratos has. He doesn't have his chains anymore. The old games, it was all about using the Blades of Chaos, where you do these big, wide, circular sweeps to hit everyone, and then the narrow swings to kind of focus in on targets. There's a similar kind of mechanic here, where you have like heavy and light blows. You have an area of effect kind of blast and shield. So it's a similar kind of idea of managing groups of enemies together and then focusing on one to take them out.
Well, let's have a look at the combat in a bit more detail then. So basically the big thing here is the quick time and the button mashing is basically out and being replaced with a new system. Yeah,
it's very much like it harks back to things like almost DMC and even recently Hellblade, stuff like that, where you make calls on, okay, who am I going to attack, how am I going to attack them. We can see here like it's still hideously violent. You'll tear people to pieces with your bare hands, but you've got this axe. You can do heavy blows that will knock people in the air. You can juggle them. You can throw it as well, and then when you call it back, so there it's being thrown, you pull it back, and when you pull it back, it does damage as well. So like I spent a lot of time like throwing it past people, and then trying to get in a position where when I called it, it would hit people on the way back. Some of the upgrades we can talk about later on. There's you can sort of have it like home in on things that we'll see a little later on. But it's about positioning yourself, like working out where everyone is. There are sort of danger indicators that will appear later on that tell you, you know, if an enemy's close, if an enemy's attacking, if there's a projectile. But you have a dodge move as well. It's really important. When you throw the axe, you can carry on punching with your fists. So you could throw it at someone, freeze them, take care of someone else up nearby. Like as you can see here, like lots of punching and shield parries. If you perfectly parry something, you can get like a little window, do some more attacks. But it's about like kind of taking a step back, seeing where everyone is, working out what the best plan of action is, and then like using that sort of strategy. So it's quite it's very action heavy, but it's also quite tactical, because you need to sort of keep in your mind, okay, there's a guy over there that I need to like not forget about, and there's some people up on the top that if I don't deal with, they're going to cause me some trouble. There's some juggling, like that's just really satisfying. You're not getting the pad kind of feel here and the timings, but the feel of it's like really solid and really meaty. Like just calling the axe back to your hand has like a real thud to it that you like. Thor's the wrong person, but you're like, I'm Thor. It's that kind of feeling when this thing smacks back. The one thing I wasn't sure about yet with combat is when you're fighting these sort of bigger bosses, because you are essentially just fighting knees. Atreus is quite useful. We'll talk a bit more about that later on, but he uses arrows you call on him to fire arrows. That distracts the troll, gives you windows to attack, but you don't get as much feedback attacking him here. The only way I really knew what was going on was that the life bar was going down, and because you sort of have to get close enough to hit him with the axe, it's kind of you don't really get much out of it feel-wise, because all you basically see are kneecaps and occasionally a big branch swinging down. And most of this for me when I fought this troll was just basically spamming the button and watching the bar go down. Like I didn't feel particularly as engaged with it as I did with the Dragur and the smaller enemies.
And in those smaller enemy environments, would you say that compared to the other games there are like less enemies now because of the way that the combat works? So it used to be that you'd have, you know, loads of people.
I think I fought about sort of, you know, maybe 10 at a time maximum. But it's more likely, I think, sort of 6 to 8 at any given time. And you get like some really interesting combinations later on. So we've got some sort of heavier Dragur here. There's some kind of ice monsters that don't appear in here later on. Here we see some of the brutal kill stuff where you can stun them and it's an insta-kill and you smash their heads in, you tread on them. These are sort of armoured guys. There's some that throw fire and projectiles. That was Atreus using like an upgraded attack. But yeah, so when you get different combinations, there's a Revenant we'll see in a little while later on. You've got basically grunts that will come in and try and attack you. You've got heavy armoured guys that will try and tank you. You've got people up on balconies throwing projectiles at you like fireballs. Then you've got a Revenant that has like a wave magic attack that will sort of teleport in and around that you have to like use Atreus to stun and then you sort of attack him. That's when it gets quite tricky, and you don't really notice that you haven't got like say 30 things on screen, because you might only have 8, but all of them have their own sort of problems, and you have to really be thinking about all of them at once, kind of going, if I throw the axe, I can't deal with this guy, but then this guy's causing me problems, so I'll take care of him first. And it does get towards the end. It was getting quite, you know, you were really having to think on your feet to keep track of everything. We'll get to the upgrades later, but I'm assuming you get later on you get like better upgrades and better sort of ways of dealing with the various sort of creatures, because the combinations are the thing that makes up the numbers.
So this is the Revenant you were talking about earlier?
Yes, so it's some kind of supernatural sort of entity. I mean, I think it is actually like a woman in there. You first find her hearing this sort of creepy singing. Her thing is that she sort of teleports around, so if you try and attack her, she disappears, and then she'll appear and like fire a kind of a wave of magic energy across the floor. So this is one of the ways you use Atreus, who his arrows will distract the troll, which we saw earlier, but it also distracts her enough for you to rush in there and get her a few whacks in before she disappears. And she's probably one of the most sort of annoying enemies, I think, in the game. With the powers I had in the first couple of hours, when you meet her, you don't really have a great deal of abilities, so you just want it to be over. You were just hitting her as much as you could before she disappeared and praying you could finish her off.
Okay, so that's Kratos. Let's have a little look at Atreus now. Now, it looks like he's here to help you solve puzzles and do other things around the world.
He's so he can read. Like Kratos has never learned to read, so that's one of his main things, and it's a really.
Right, hang on. How does that work?
Well, like I'm guessing like the Spartan army wasn't good on its literacy.
So who's taught Atreus to read then?
His mother.
Right. And he didn't think of teaching Kratos how to read at the same time.
You've seen Kratos, right? You try going Kratos with a book and go, do you want to do some ABC?
All right, fine. So he can read.
Yeah, so he can read, yeah. It's a really good way of building up the world, because, there's one point he points at a thing and goes, this is a market where the giants used to meet up. And so him kind of reading out stuff to Kratos is a fairly painless way of exposition and like building out the world. And there's also sort of puzzle solving in it, like he'll tell you he'll help you with puzzles that kind of go, I think this looks like we should do this, or it looks like we should do that. As I mentioned before, combat-wise, he can distract people with arrows. You can see, like there as well, he jumps on them, like on some of the enemies, and like kind of chokes them out with his bow. Yeah. He has his own skill tree, so you can shape Kratos' ability to fight. This is like obviously quite axe-heavy upgrades here, boosting the power of the axe. Atreus, you could make more direct combat and more ranged. You can sort of like adjust both of their fighting styles to suit what you want to do.
And is a lot of the time using him as essentially bait, like to distract people?
It's distraction, yeah. Like I mean, his main weapon is the bow, so he will shoot the bow, and enemies will turn towards him, and then you can deal with them. Like so, the Revenant, it stops them teleporting. The troll, it'll like direct your attention towards Atreus, so you can get in close without the troll like just squishing you with one go.
So that's Atreus. We talked a little bit about him helping you solve puzzles, but Kratos can do that on his own as well, right, with his axe.
Yeah, the puzzles are quite physical, sort of kinetic, and quite satisfying. So the axe, the Leviathan axe, has this sort of ice ability. You can see it freezes enemies, but it also freezes anything it hits, basically. So very early on, you find a door that you can pull open, but as soon as you let go of the chain, the door slams. What you can do is while you're holding the chain, you throw the axe at a cog. You see these blue cogs. Blue is the kind of the puzzle color, basically. If you see anything glowing blue, it's some kind of interactive element. Axe hits the cog, freezes it in place, and then you can go through the door and call the axe back. And it drops bridges. There's chests you can find that will only open when you smash 3 seals, and the seals are like hidden, so it's like a visual puzzle. You have to like wander around the area and find. You might find that there's if you get in just the right angle and look up to the left, you'll see a vase like hidden away in the corner, and you smash all of those to open the chest. And there's some really nice like I say, very kinetic, very mobile stuff. So one of the puzzles, you have to like lift up a big spiked trap like Indiana Jones, a spiked ceiling thing. You lift it up, freeze it in place, and then you have to go in there and fight without the axe.
Right.
And then you can call the axe back and then freeze another bit of the puzzle before this thing drops. So it's very, very physical. You're not like kind of walking around on tiles or pulling cogs. You are hitting everything you solve by hitting it with an axe, basically.
Okay, so we'll get onto the upgrade system now, but just before we do, your axe is blue. You say that blue indicates like a puzzle thing. Did you get a sense that that might change colour as you go throughout the game and be able to swap between different elements?
Well, it does tie into the upgrades, because you can see in the upgrade section when we get to it, because you can upgrade like the strength of your axe. You can craft different weapons different armor, I should say. But there are like rune abilities. So we can see here we're upgrading the axe, and it's basically just boosting its attack power. On the side there, you can see it says like runes, defense, stuff like that. So you can enhance characteristics as well as physical abilities. So I suspect that rune abilities will open up different elemental effects. Like one of the first things you unlock is this blast on your shield, and it's like a sort of a energy blast that knocks everyone back, and it's a way of clearing space. But the implication is that you will be able to craft and change Kratos quite a lot. You can see some of the outfits here. Like I crafted a blue tunic, which is the one they didn't choose here, and I immediately hated it, because it just looked weird and strange on Kratos to see him wearing like a blue soldier's uniform almost. But it was the one with the higher stats.
And this upgrade system is all done with something called hack silver. Is that stuff you find in the world, or do you get it killing enemies?
So yeah, you find resources and hack silver. So hack silver is kind of a currency. Resources are, I think it says like frost ice or frozen flame. So yeah, frozen flame is like a resource you find in the world. So essentially, it's almost like, say, like The Last of Us with rags and alcohol and sticks and nails. You find things that you then use to upgrade your gear with money. So there is a kind of an economy and a resource kind of economy in there, but it's not like there's no microtransactions. It's not like you can't buy this stuff with real money. It's just a way of giving you incentive in the world to look for things. You find chests hidden around with hack silver and different sort of resources and stuff. So it's a way of encouraging you to explore the world, because it is a wide open space now. It's not free roaming, but you will see lots of little nooks and crannies and pathways. You will sort of wonder what's in that cave there, and you'll find like little puzzles. You'll find like a chest behind a portcullis door, and you'll be like, okay, how do I get this open? And that's there to kind of make you wander around, make you explore, make you find things that you need. You need this stuff to make Kratos better. And you might go, I really want this weapon, I really want this piece of armor.
Yeah.
So you'll go off on a little side quest just to find as much stuff as you can.
Okay, so after 3 hours with the game, still quite excited to see some more then.
Yeah, I really look. It's interesting. The pacing is different. I don't want to spoil too much of how it begins, but it's a much more sort of understated beginning. It doesn't have like quite the sort of spectacular boom that it normally opens with, and Kratos is a really interesting character now. Like there's a lot of, he's still basically the same guy, but he's like hundreds of years later. He's sadder, and he's got a lot on his mind. He's trying not to be the person he was, and it's just a more interesting kind of take. They couldn't have brought him back the way he was. Like he was a horrible human being in the previous games, and the more realistic the games got, the less forgivable he was. So now he is, he's remorseful. He's kind of still loses his temper, but he still kind of is angry. The combat's really good. It's really just really satisfying to like hit something with the axe and fight, and it's interesting to have that kind of mechanic of dealing with groups. And it's not like Assassin's Creed where they all take their turns. You have to keep an eye on everyone. Even in the back of your mind, you can't see them. You just know where they are and keep track of everything. So it's really sort of interesting. There's a load of stuff I can't talk too much about, but some of the footage they haven't given us here that I saw towards the end is really sort of fantastical. Like it really goes a bit more sort of fantasy, and there's a couple of amazing creatures, and it just looks like I mean, it looks luxurious and it feels luxurious, like super AAA. But it just feels exciting because you don't quite know what to expect and you don't quite know where it's going to go. So it's exciting in that aspect of like, it's genuinely like you go around a corner and you're like, what am I going to see? It's that sort of exciting.
So that's our first 3 hours with God of War. Let us know if you have any questions about it in the comments below. Click the boxes on the left for more content from us. And don't forget to hit the big button in the middle to subscribe for more gaming news, reviews, previews and features right here on GamesRadar Plus.
This weapon, any weapon, comes from here.